What's up, guys? Today we're going to be watching some more real estate videos and reacting to them, so let's check them out.
This is how lazy but smart people invest in real estate without having to deal with all the paperwork and all the confusion of buying an investment property.
What? Paperwork and confusion in buying a investment property? You mean like a contract? Alright, we're 7 seconds into this thing, and I've already got some questions, but I'm going to give her the benefit of the doubt and just keep moving with it.
With this technique, you're going to buy a primary residence and you're going to live in it. And you're going to live in it for at least 2 years. Now, the reason why I say 2 years is because you don't want to pay capital gains tax on your real estate investments.
Okay, so she's got a point there, so let's see where she goes with this.
And notice how I said you don't want to pay it, period. What you're going to do at this point is you're going to buy a primary residence, a beautiful house, you're going to live in it for 2 years.
So what she's pitching is you're going to buy a house, live in it for 2 years. I'm okay with that so far. Let's see where this goes.
Then, when you decide, okay, it's time to upgrade, I need a new house, you're going to buy another house, but you're not going to sell the old house. You're going to move into the new house, and with the old house, you're going to rent it out.
Okay, so what she's pitching right here is you're going to buy your primary residence, you're going to hold that as a rental, and you're going to use anything else that you have in order to purchase a secondary home. Okay, and make that your primary residence. That is possible.
And you're going to do this every 2 years. Every 2 years, you're going to buy a new house, keep the old house, and start renting it out.
Okay, so says that you're going to do this every 2 years, okay? And that's not necessarily possible, but I'm going to bite my tongue for a second and see if she explains the rest of it.
After 10 years, you're going to have 5 properties.
No. After 10 years, you're not going to have 5 properties. That's just not how this works because of the way capital gains work. But I've still got 44 more seconds to give her before we give her a rating. So I'm going to let her finish.
Then at some point, you're going to be like, well, I bought in a really good neighborhood and the appreciation is really showing for this property that I bought back in 2023. So now with that property that you bought in 2023, you're going to sell it, but you're not going to pay capital gains tax on it because you lived in it as a primary residence for 2 years.
All right, there's an asterisk on this. All right, there's a huge asterisk on this. She's still got 28 seconds left, so let me circle back to that asterisk.
This is called a Section 121 capital gains tax exclusion.
All right, a Section 121 is definitely possible for a capital gains tax exclusion when you go sell your property if you lived in it 2 of the last 5 years. Let's see if she explains that.
You do not have to pay capital gains taxes on properties that you've lived in for 2 years as a primary residence out of the 5 years that you've owned it.
She says, listen, 2 years that you lived in out of 5 years you owned it, okay? So I'm about to press the errant button pretty quick because she just contradicted herself. Because all those properties that you just owned back then, when you bought them, before that 5-year mark, because she said that you could have 5 properties in 10 years, right? You're going to pay capital gains tax on every single one of those. Every single one.
This is just an easy way to get started with real estate investing. If you already own a house and you don't necessarily want to do house hacking, just keep buying houses and every 2 years move into a new house and rent out the old house. I guarantee it's so much easier than you think and you don't have to pay capital gains tax.
What? No. You just contradicted yourself twice. All right, let me run that back just a little bit because she was on the right course and then it kind of just went out into left field. So first things first, you can have your primary residence. Then instead of selling your primary residence, if your lender allows it, and there's certain stipulations on this, you can potentially rent out your secondary residence. Usually it has to be rented out prior to you closing on your next primary residence. And also, that generally means, unless you find a hard money lender or somebody else that will allow this to happen, but that generally means that you're going to have a long-term tenant in a signed contract, typically speaking 6 months or longer. Usually they look for a minimum of a year. So that means that you can't just turn your original house into an Airbnb and expect your lender to be happy with it. Yes, you can sell your house that you lived in 2 of the last 5 years. Remember, that's 2 of the last 5 years. Okay, that's important. And you can not pay capital gains tax. Asterisks right here. Asterisks on your Section 121, as it says here, is if you are filing as a single person, then that first $250,000 in profit is tax-free. If you file jointly, then that first $500,000 of profit is going to be tax-free. Anything outside of that, you are still going to pay capital gains tax on. That's asterisk number 1. Also, with the Section 121, there are other asterisks to that. First, you have to be able to qualify for Section 121, which there are plenty of reasons why you can, but also there's a lot of exclusions and limitations as to why somebody doesn't qualify for a Section 121. You still have to qualify with your lender with owning that property as a rental, because sometimes they will not let you qualify, and it depends on your credit, your income, and your past history as well, because you do have to still hit lending requirements. Then on top of that, I'm going to circle back just a little bit where she starts her video. I mean, she's just contradicting herself, where you can own 5 properties. You can't do this and get 5 properties that you maintain ownership of, okay? Now, I can do this, buy a house, live in it for 2 years, turn it into a rental for a couple years, sell it, get the capital gains tax waiver on that, buy another house, live in it for a couple years, turn it into a rental, and just rinse and repeat. I can't do that. But if you think that you're going to be able to do this, and every time you buy a house, as she puts it, you're just going to have another rental property, that's not going to happen. It just isn't. Because you're going to pay capital gains tax every single time you sell one of those properties. That just is what it is. Because you didn't live in it 2 of the last 5 years. So if I go and say, look, I have house 1, living out for 2 years, and then I say, well, I don't want to live in house 1 anymore, I'm going to go live in house number 2, right? By the time I've hit the 2-year mark in house number 2, I'm at the 4-year mark for house number 1, right? So this third house I'm living in, yes, I've got 2 rental properties, but if I don't sell house number 1 within that next year, then I did not live in it for 2 of the last 5 years. And then I just open myself up to paying capital gains tax again. And it might not be the right time to sell that house. You might decide that you still want to hold it as a rental. So because of that, that just doesn't work here. It just doesn't. So that's number 1. The next item is you still have to qualify for this to work with your lender, because your lender may not say that you can do this. You might have to sell your house in order to move. And it all depends on your current income, your lender, and everything of that nature, because she's using lenders in here as the epitome of how you do this, because you're assumingly starting out with your first house as a first-time home buyer based on what she said. If you're one of the rare first-time home buyers that has the cash to do this, hey, that's awesome, more power to you. But if you're using lenders, which most first-time home buyers are using, they're not going to be able to do this. That's the beginning of the wormhole that you're going to go down there. That's the beginning of this rabbit hole. Second, you're going to want to remember a couple other things, because here's the next asterisk. Not every property you buy is a good rental property, okay? First house I lived in, yeah, I'd say it could have been a decent rental. I could have had a couple of, potential renters, couple $100 a month. I mean, it would have been okay, all right? But as people grow, as they decide that they need a bigger property, or they decide that they want to move somewhere else, that doesn't work. Because let's say that you get a really nice house that's, 3,500, 4,000 square feet, okay? That's not always a great rental property, okay? Most people with rental properties are buying houses somewhere in the ballpark between 900 and 1,700, 1,800 square feet that people are paying a certain amount depending on their market area, in rent for. If they're doing houses, single family. If they're doing condos, then that's a different story. But again, you're typically looking 2 to maybe 4 bedrooms, usually 2 to 3 bedrooms. You could do a 1-bedroom, it just depends on the market. But if I go out and buy my dream home because I just got a new job and I got a bonus or whatever, and I went and bought a 6-bedroom house that's on 3 acres of land out in the middle of nowhere, that's probably not a really good rental property. Just being frank with you, And then on top of it, you've also got other factors to rentals. Real quick question. How many of y'all watching this currently live in an HOA? If you live in an HOA, or if you have CCRs or deed restrictions or anything of that nature, you might not be allowed to rent your property out. You just might not be, okay? I mean, I've helped people buy and sell houses that are in certain HOAs where they have a maximum number of units that can be rented at any point in time. So if your HOA says that you can only have I don't know, 5 properties at any time rented, and you got to pass the board's approval to get your property rented, and then they have to pass the lease and they have to approve the tenant, you might decide that it's not even worth it for you to rent that property, because that's just a lot of hurdles and that's a lot of outside sources. I can tell you it's going to be a lot harder for you to get a tenant that qualifies if there's multiple other parties involved versus if I just have a house here and want somebody to rent it because I think that they're qualified based on whatever my criteria is. Frankly, to start this thing off saying lazy people usually are not going to be investing in multiple rental properties. There's not. Why? Because contrary to popular belief, this is a lot of work. There's a lot of work going into finding the right deal, valuing the right property, and then making sure that it is in adequate shape for a tenant to come in, live there, and then if you're not going to use a property management company, then you're going to have to deal with any sort of repairs, complaints, rent collection, all sorts of that. And then if you are going to use a property management company, you still got to find a property management company that you trust, that can do what you need. And then you may or may not have to talk to your property manager a good bit about what's going on with your property, depending on what repairs are needed, what the quarterly outlooks look like, etc. So there's a lot of things that really go into this that just aren't being touched on. So yes, you can do a Section 121. Yes, you can be tax-free asterisk on the first however much amount, $250,000 if you're filing single, $500,000 profit if you're filing jointly. But you're still going to pay capital gains tax if it's higher than that, and you still have to make sure that you're selling your property within that window of time, or else you're never going to qualify for that. Otherwise, you got to go live there again for 2 of the last 5 years that you've owned it. This works on a very small scale. I will agree that this is a very good way for you to possibly get your first rental property. After properties 1 and 2, this doesn't work. And even when you go to buy property number 2, you still may be required to have a down payment. VA does allow it for you to do that if it's within certain criteria. You could have a second VA loan on a property as long as you're buying it. It's over $144,200, and as long as it's outside of a certain area or it's bigger or smaller or whatever criteria that the lender needs, and you have eligibility left for that amount. FHA, you may not be able to do this. Otherwise, expect a down payment, and it possibly could be as high as 20%, if not 25%, depending on your lending situation. So just be aware that while this is a way to start doing things, this is not something that's going to be sustainable if you want to go from owning 2 properties to owning 20 properties. That's just not how this is going to work. This is going to be sustainable if you want to own 1, 2 properties, get the equity out of the first one, maybe get some equity in the second one, and then by the time you're going for your third one, you're prepping to sell either number 1 or number 2 in order for you to qualify for this. Other than that, this just doesn't work. I'm going to give this a 4.5 because she didn't do her homework, she didn't explain the whole picture, and because she had the right information in the beginning and went completely left. So I'll give her a B for effort because hey, it takes a lot to get in front of a camera and put yourself out there, and I appreciate that. But in terms of the information, that information is a solid 4.5. Don't forget to subscribe.